Elden Ring is From Software's first foray into open-world game design, and as a result, these changes have been reflected in the game's soundtrack, for better or for worse. The Soulsborne games, up until now, have had a history with being selective in their usage of music. The songs were usually reserved for boss fights and special areas, intentionally leaving a lot of the world quiet, with only the sound effects of the world to accompany the player. However, in Elden Ring, the soundtrack has now been split into two main sections: the open world areas and the boss fights. The best case study for Elden Ring's overworld music is in the starting area, Limgrave. The music in this area features some harrowing and drawn-out notes played on a violin, mixed in with some fast-paced noise in the background. This track does an excellent job of reinforcing the beautiful but often desolate grassy natural landscapes of the area, and leaves a major first impression on the player for the tone throughout the rest of the game. However, Limgrave is a big area with lots of structures and dungeons to explore, and over time this track can become a bit grating. With a runtime of 3 minutes and 12 seconds, the Limgrave background music shouldn't be criticized too harshly for its lack of note variety or complexity due to this being done by design. However, I personally found myself getting tired of hearing the same notes repeat again and again while exploring. The music succeeds in its intention to invoke an unsettling feeling into the player about the surrounding area, but this can become more of an annoyance later on when the player has explored most of the area and has grown much more powerful beyond the enemies of Limgrave. For many watching this right now, there might be another notorious open world game that's dwelling in the back of your minds at the moment. If you don't mind me taking a moment to quote-unquote link Elden Ring to another game, I feel that Breath of the Wild takes a very similar approach to its overworld music. Breath of the Wild has a tragic and abandoned setting, with a musical score that is much more mournful than triumphant like most of its predecessors in the series. Much like with Elden Ring, its backing soundtrack takes a more subtle approach, and this serves to subconsciously fit the mood of the world rather than be triumphantly blared into the ears of the player at all times. However, Elden Ring's world music is more so often designed to actively invoke feelings of dread, as opposed to Breath of the Wild's sparse piano notes and feelings of solemn desolation. This is most blatantly observed in later areas such as Caelid, where the strings are played in such a way where they sound almost like a swarm of insects, accompanying the rivers of blood and demonic-looking sky. This track has helped to shape one of the most memorable video game locations I've ever been to. There's still a threshold I hit sometimes where I need to leave the area and refresh myself to visit it later. A large difference between Breath of the Wild and Elden Ring's worlds is the lack of save spaces in Elden Ring. There are a few towns with lively or calming music throughout Zelda's lands, but Elden Ring has a very sparse amount of areas with even neutral sounding music, beyond hubs like the Round Table hold. Overall, the open world music elements of Elden Ring are very fitting for their respective regions and enhance the atmosphere, but they can become a bit too much if the player spends too much time in one area for too long. On the other side of the soundtrack, the boss battle tracks in Elden Ring range in quality throughout the game. Everyone will have their own opinions on what tracks were memorable, but with the new Soulsborne game, I can't help but compare it to some of its predecessors. With the mid-2010s titles, like Bloodborne and Dark Souls 3, almost every track hits you with a rush of adrenaline and awe, partially because the music was saved up until you encountered a boss or special moment. However, with Sekiro's 2019 release, I feel that there was a shift towards incorporating some more ambient and atmospheric music while still keeping a lot of the areas of exploration silent. While it may not be fair to expect an orchestral soundtrack like with Bloodborne, it is a shame that some boss tunes in Elden Ring are not very catchy, and most are produced with MIDI. However, some of my favorite tracks in Elden Ring include bangers from the likes of Radagon, Margit, Godric, the Ancestor Spirit, and the Godskin Apostles. While players will often find themselves jamming to the music of a newly discovered Godskin Apostle, and then another Godskin Apostle, and then another, there is such a plethora of good boss fights in this game that it's not really an issue when From Software copies and pastes a few mini bosses here and there, except for the Godskin duo. Screw those guys. Overall, while I do think that Elden Ring's music is great in some areas, I also feel that it has room for improvement in others. I've already sunk over 100 hours into the game, and I've loved most of my time with it, even when I would get stuck. The open world area music tracks do a great job of being unintrusive while also enhancing the mood, but I would like to see a little more variety and composition from them in the future. Moreover, I would like to see more memorable boss fight music with a full orchestra for future FromSoft titles, or at least for the story required battles. This is my first attempt at doing this style of video, so let me know what your thoughts are on this topic in the comments down below, and consider sticking around and subbing for any future analysis videos. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one.